Thank you for tuning into Hinton Cast. This is Maggie Block. I am the deputy publisher at Hinton Publishing. We are so excited to be sharing these conversations that we had with authors in the Pacific Northwest who belong to communities that have historically been under-invited to share their work, aka the kind of author we publish. Now, I need to let you know that these are conversations that we had in early 2024. There's a number of reasons why we weren't able to get these podcasts out earlier. The number one being that we're a really small team who are trying to accomplish a heck of a lot. That said, these conversations are evergreen. Don't mind us if you hear us talking about something in the present tense that you now know is in the past. The knowledge, the insight, the brilliance of these conversations are going to resonate with you today. And hey, better late than never, right? Without further ado, I'm going to pass the mic back in time.
Hey, Reagan Jackson.
Hey, Juan Carlos Reyes.
How would you like to introduce yourself? Would you like to elaborate on your favorite color? Or a more interesting question, would you like to elaborate on what your ideal writing setting is?
I think the two are interconnected. So, and part of that is because I love color. And anyone who's ever been to my house understands that. I love beautiful, bright, brilliant colors. My house is turquoise, so I'm assuming that's my favorite color. And I like to write at home, surrounded by beautiful colors, flowers, quiet. I used to be the writer who could only write in busy places where there was a lot of everything, noise, clattering, at a Starbucks or something. But, before we canceled Starbucks. But now, I need a lot of quiet. I need a lot of space to really hear into the work.
That's so cool. I would probably say that mine is any space that doesn't feel cluttered. So I find myself writing really well at home for the first time. The office that we currently have are just basically that big closet that is an office.
Mm-hmm.
I've had to sort of put up a bunch of wall art, even a jigsaw puzzle that my family bought me, New York, right? That we just sort of put on a piece of cardboard and put it up. But it was just an attempt to add color, like you're saying, right? And I just like a hodgepodge of colors, right?
Mm-hmm.
The messier the wall feels or the messier the surroundings feel, the better I feel. And so I do feel like my ideal writing space is something that is like a hodgepodge of visual aesthetic that doesn't have a centering theme. It just feels as busy as my head does.
Mm-hmm.
And as non sequitur, I guess, as my thoughts can be sometimes.
When did you first know you were a writer?
Man, you want to go deep right away.
That's kind of what I'm known for.
Yeah. I think I would probably say in college is when I made the choice to think I want to explore something creative through words. But I would probably say sophomore year in high school is when I really felt like I could just do something weird and fun.
Mm-hmm.
So there was this writing exercise in the first week of class, and our English teacher in high school was this old Vietnam War vet who I think always there were stories of him about how he would react to sounds. And so I don't know how or why I internalized that, but in the writing exercise that he gave us, he just, we were reading a book and I forget what the book is, but he asked elaborate on a character. And so I took these two characters out and put them into a noir, a detective noir play script, and it was just dialogue back and forth. But there was so much insistence on sort of whispering between these two characters, in some back alley about something, and I forget the content of what it was, but I just remember feeling I want them to be whispering to each other. I want their intensity to be their intensity to feel as much visual. So I was like in the dialogue embedding how they were like sort of like commenting on each other's clothes and each other's sort of like vehicles and all that stuff to give sort of exposition that way. But that's when I felt like, oh, this is really, really cool, because I could capture a feeling, but at the same time respond to somebody's creative needs, right, in a way, right, or some an audience's needs, where like I didn't want to trigger this man in any way, because of all the stories that have been passed down to us by like the juniors and seniors at the time, right?
But you like wanted to address it.
Yeah.
Way.
But I wanted to do it like I wanted to tell a story that I wanted to tell, but I didn't want to trigger him. I didn't want to bring any harm to him in that moment. So yeah, I think that was the first time where I just thought to myself, this feels really good to like be able to internalize this moment and respond to somebody through it, right? When did you realize, like, okay, I can do this, I want to do this?
I was apparently 8. This is a story that gets told to me. I remember some parts of it, but not all of it. But I know I was a kid who didn't like redundancy. I'm an adult who doesn't like redundancy, so that doesn't surprise me. And, you know, my mom read everything to me, so it didn't occur to me, like, why should I have to know how to read? Like, you do this. Like, one of us has got this. That's you. That's your job. Like, and in my mind, in my 8-year-old mind, I just thought we were going to live together forever. So, like, I was like, I don't feel pressed. So she was like, yeah, but if you want to be a writer, you have to learn how to read.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, oh, well, I am a writer.
Yeah.
So I guess I'll do what is required of me.
And what did you read?
Everything, anything. I read all the time. I'm still reading. Like, I always have like books in my purse. I always have a notebook in my purse as well. Yeah. And she started taking me to the Humane Bookstore. This was when we call it as we were getting our PhD. I went to grad school with my mom when I turned 2.5. They got divorced, and so my mom moved to Colorado with her half of the house, and enrolled in graduate school. And so every Saturday we would go to the Humane Bookstore, and it's a Black-owned, just independent bookstore, which I love. And we would I get to pick out a highlight magazine or the book of my choice, and there's a lady there who would read Anansi the Spider stories to us. It was like our Saturday morning vibe, and then we go to African drumming and dancing class. And
do you find that the more the more you journal, the better you are as a reader? Because that's one thing I have found, that the more I journal, and it isn't to say I'm just accounting for what has happened in some day that I find interesting. It's I'm sort of accounting how I felt in the moment, how I felt about other people. But the more I do that, the better reader I become.
I find the more I listen, the better reader I become. So when I stop, there's like kind of a distinctive moment for me, maybe a couple years back, kind of at the beginning of my own podcast, The Deep End, where I stopped listening to respond or listening to answer, and just sat and listened to listen. And that has absolutely changed me as a reader.
That is so hard to do for so many people.
No.
You don't find that?
It's easy to do.
I find it easy, but I sometimes find myself in conversation or observing a conversation and looking at people's sort of shoulders and body language and expressions, and already see them jumping to say something after somebody else has spoken. And I realize that that's sort of, maybe that's a trait of writers or a trait of people that want to be creative and sort of like reflect something to the world. Right?
It's a trait of people who want to be heard.
Yeah.
Right? Like, if you're preparing yourself because you want that moment.
Yeah.
And to me, what I realized is you have to give that moment.
Yeah. Yep.
In order to then be able to position yourself for other people to receive you, because there's something unsatisfying to me about it. If you know the other person's only waiting to say the thing, and it may or may not correspond to anything that you're even talking about, or you're not together.
It also informs what you even can say to them, right? Like how to say it to them, how to move sort of that, like the question you began with, right? Like how to move this into like a much more profound space, right? That seems really cool.
And here we go.
Yeah. All right, so if we talk about your book and even mine and sort of like go into kind of what this means to us, this moment, how has the city prepared you to release this into the world? So it's one thing to say that the city informed the work, which it has, but how has the city prepared you for this moment of engaging with the world about your book?
I love this question. And I'm going to answer it, but before I do, I want to back up a bit and give a bit more fuller introduction.
Yeah.
Because in a lot of ways I do feel like the city introduces me.
Yeah.
But I want to position myself as well. So yeah, my name is Reagan Jackson. Preferred pronouns she and her. Many people know me as the co-executive director of Young Women Empowered. And I'm also a writer, and I've been a writer before I even knew all the other things that I would be, or all the other parts of me have kind of come into existence. That's always just been a thing that I knew about myself. And a lot has changed, right, since I was 8. It's been a journey, but that is not. And when I think about Seattle, I think about my 17-year-old self. I was 17 when I moved here, back in 97, so y'all can do that math and find out how old I am.
I think we're the same age.
Yeah. I moved here for writing. I moved here to go to school at the University of Washington. And part of it is because there wasn't, even though like, I think of myself, I'm a pretty intelligent person. I did not do well in school. And the only thing that I did do well at was in English and writing. It was the only place in school where I was seen and rewarded for my work. And so for me going to college, like, one, it was a long shot. Like, I got rejected from a lot of other schools. But UW was actually my first choice because of the writing program. And when I came out here, I was that kid who I finished the majority of my coursework, all my requirements by sophomore year because I knew what I was going to do. And I knew it because that's the only thing I thought I could do. And the gift that writing ended up giving me was pushing me to explore other aspects of my life. And part of that is because I wanted to have something interesting to write about. In order to do that, I forced myself to travel and to live in other parts of the world. And yeah, it's been a gift. But interestingly enough, like after living in Japan, living in Spain, living in Chile, doing my master's degree in international education, I came back to Seattle because it always did feel like a place where I could be. And I really loved the ways, especially in which there's such a vibrant community of writers. There's poetry slams and community open mics, and people are forever writing things and sharing it with one another in a way that feels perpetually inviting. And I don't know, so I was really excited when we became a city of literature as a designation. And I know you had something to do with that. You want to tell us a bit more about your relationship to writing in the city?
Yeah, I'm going to take your lead because I was not prepared to do that whole introduction, but I just love your professionalism. My name is Juan Carlos Reyes, he, him pronoun. I was born in Guayaquil, Ecuador, and then I came to the States. My grandmother was the first to arrive here. She landed in New York. She met and married this Cuban refugee, right? He was a hard-edged former farmer who now lived in an urban setting, and his family owns an apartment building in West New York, New Jersey, right across the river from Manhattan. And so my mom, after she and my father split, she kind of took it upon herself to just travel the East Coast a little bit, the Northeast, to figure out where she wanted to land. And she realized that she couldn't be far from her mother. And my grandmother just offered this she really did this for our entire family, right? Her sisters, my cousins, my aunts and uncles, just offered us a place to land. And so my mom was just like, okay, there's this apartment building, there's this basement apartment. And so just my first experience of the United States was a one window in a one big studio, where the bedroom, living room, dining room, and kitchen were just one big space, and my mother on her twin bed, me on my twin bed, just like kind of across the way from each other, and just thinking about how just cities generally have informed everything that I am and everything that I do. So I, from there, grew up and went to high school in Jersey City, went to college at NYU, and it was there that I think I struggled the most, not just academically, but realizing that there was something about expression that I was incomplete with. So everything from being misunderstood about my own expressions, feeling misunderstood about how I sort of perceive the world. And so in so many ways, reading became this fascinating escape for me. And it wasn't like I just read to read. I really did find, and it was not a strategic thing, works in translation, because it felt that I was a math major in college. I had no idea what like the U.S. literary canon was, and I still sort of I know what it is logically, but I don't have any affection for it or intimacy with it. I am always looking at works in translation that feel like they use and expand what English is and can be in ways that feel very profound to me. And so after New York, I got a fellowship to be a Penn USA fellow in LA. And my wife and I had met in New York. She's from Oregon. And so after my fellowship was over in LA, she needed to be back in the Pacific Northwest, and I needed a city. And it was as easy as looking at a map and saying, what meets those two guidelines? And Seattle was just it. And we lived right behind the convention center during our time here. And I just remember in LA, everything felt curated for me. I got to meet all these really cool people, interesting people as a result of being a fellow. But in Seattle back in 2007, it felt like I could just walk into community here. And I was like you just illustrated a moment ago, like I was being invited into these spaces and welcomed into these spaces. It was back then that I met these writers that when we came back to town after I went to grad school were my friends, right? Anastasia, Harold Taw, Duji, Tahat, like all these people that I had met before were here, right, in these spaces. And so, it was here too that I met a fellow at, the writer in residence at Hugo House who introduced me to the University of Alabama MFA program. And she said, hey, you're writing, cool, weird stuff. And I think this writer in Alabama, Michael Martone, would be great for you. And so I applied there. I only applied to a few places, and Alabama just gave me so much funding to be there. And so we moved out there, and it was an informing time. It was a hard time. It was an informing time. It felt like I went in there confident about what I could do, and I eventually left there confident about what I can do. But there was this interim period of not everybody knowing what I was doing, right? Which was fine, but it also felt like I felt like an alien in so many ways. I mean, this is Alabama, which we found our people there. When you find your people, they're like family. but it felt hard, right? At times, especially after my kids were born there, and I was trying to speak Spanish to them in public, and this was the 2016 election, and it was explicitly made clear that certain things weren't welcome. So, but being creative there also felt like this interesting community that I could just pop in and out of as I could. I was invited into these spaces, and it felt good. And I also felt like, uninvited in some spaces, which, I only had a sort of like, when you're in the middle of it, you just want to just work hard and do what you can to be a part of things, and you process later all the ways in which you were not invited, right? And being back in the city felt weird that we were back in Seattle. I got sort of this. So in Alabama, I was able to lead study abroad programs. I was able to teach in the prisons there, poetry, creative nonfiction, and literature in the prisons. And it felt like I did everything I could to get an experience to get out. And Seattle University offered me a gig, and here I am, right? Tenured now, right? Seven years later. And when I got back into town, plugging back in felt almost as natural as the first time around. But a lot had changed. 10 years had passed, and the city was much more corporatized. The arts, programming, and culture and literary part of the city was much more formalized. And that felt like, oh, okay, I have to get to know this new city. And so I did everything I could to get in, right? Just to sort of meet people. And I felt like one of the things that I was, missing in Alabama was a sort of like the kind of creative community that I trust and that trusted me. And so I often can't write unless I feel like I'm in a creative community that trusts me and that I trust them. And so that happened here, which I'm really thankful for. So I got involved with Seattle City of Literature in 2017 as a volunteer, and then I eventually sort of, became a board member, and then I led the organization as president of the board for a year. It was during that time that they had just gotten the designation to be a city of literature, and so it felt very cool to be part of an organization and sort of like be in this early formative, foundational sort of like work to know what it meant to connect the city to the world, help the city connect to itself, right? This organization to that organization, this writer to that opportunity. And I just enjoyed that, right? I mean, the city gave me so much for 2 years, from 2007 to 2009, before I went to the University of Alabama for grad school, that I just wanted, I don't know, what my only impulse at the time was like, what can I do for the city and for the arts community and the literary arts community? What can I do? Because I just, when I am at a loss about what to do, I just will help. Because not to expect anything back. I just want to help. And it was a really great time. And I got to be sort of part of the Jack Straw program. I got the Artist Trust Fellowship, and then the pandemic happened, and I just was writing. So much about this book is here because as I'm doing all this, yes, writing happened as it could happen, but writing happened because I was so enmeshed in the concerns of the city. And so much of this thing feels like an expression of like the concerns as I saw them, which I feel, I didn't plan this segue, but I feel like it's a perfect segue. There's so much about your book that responds to concerns that you have about this place.
Oh, it's concerning.
And so, as a way to sort of then ask maybe more specific questions, how did this book sort of circle the drain and then sort of like fall right into what you felt most concerning about the city? Not only sort of as you saw it, but as others expressed it to you. How did everything come together as like this book, a reflection of your feelings of this place, but also a reflection of other people's feelings of this place, like a collective concern?
Yeah. Okay. one, I kind of want to go back to your comment about feeling underinvited or uninvited.
Yeah.
Because I think that that's kind of essential framework for the ways in which this book evolved. And I want to just be clear that I didn't know I was writing a book.
Yeah.
And yeah, that wasn't, for the person who's always writing a book, this was not the book I was writing. Like I was writing, some other poetry book or some fiction book. And it had never occurred to me that I would even want to be a journalist. Like in no way, shape, or form. Like I took one journalism class once in high school, and I did publish a piece off of that, 2 pieces in fact, which was cool, and I liked that part of it. I was like, ooh, everybody loves a byline, right? I'm like, there's my name, it's in print, like this is really cool. But I promptly forgot that and was like, yeah, but I'm writing the great American novel, and I'm journalism, how dry, how boring, how trite. And then in 2013, I was at brunch at my friend Sabrina's house and met the founders of the Seattle Globalist. And, I was just talking about other things. Again, my journey with writing has been basically knowing I needed to live a life in order to have something worth writing about. And that prompting me into the field of education and into study abroad and into these bigger experiences. So when we were at brunch, we started chatting about study abroad programs, and at that time, I want to say, like, was it Congress had passed? They had given like a whole bunch of money to different universities to support them ostensibly in having more people of color participate in study abroad, because they were making the connections and realizing like, oh, hey, when young people go abroad, it is a marketable thing. Like they come back with different language skill sets or different, ways of engaging that are really, helpful, useful to capitalism. And as with anything useful to capitalism, we got to fix that. Like we got to make sure that, these black and brown kids can also like be useful to capitalism.
Yeah.
And as someone who had a transformative experience of studying abroad, in that I felt like for me, the first time I really went abroad, I was 16, and I went to Senegal with my mom, and it fundamentally disrupted my illusion of what blackness was, to be in a country where everyone from the janitor to the president was black. Because in Wisconsin, black was a tiny box. It was a box where you could, if you're black, you play basketball. That's the sport that black people play. Or, like there's just all these like limits of who you were supposed to be, and none of them fit who I was. And so I was internalizing this feeling of always being wrong and never being enough. And that experience for me, like, it transformed who I thought I could be. And it validated me in a way that it helped me to survive high school long enough to get to the better parts of life. And so, yeah, like when I realized when I was in my 20s is when I realized that was even a job, like that you could be a study abroad program director. I was like, wait, Jorge's out here getting paid for this? Like, he just lives in Spain with his lover and his little dog, and he checks in on us like for 10 minutes a day. Like, that's his job. I was like, oh, this is about to be my job. Like, I would do such a better job. So yeah, I started riffing and started talking about what study abroad meant to me, and then also about the ways in which, when I went to Spain, it was me and like 30 white women. There was like, like 2 people of color on the study abroad program, and everywhere I went, it was like, I don't know, I was just in this unexpected sorority. And my experience in Spain was really different than their experience in terms of how people treated me in the country, what I was exposed to, what people said to me. And no one was able to meet me where I was. No one was able to process that with me. You get the little pamphlet they give you of like, oh, welcome to Cadiz. Like, here's where you can go to the post office. Here's where you can buy lotion. Here's where you can get your hair done. And I'm looking at this like, these people do not know what to do with this hair. You know what I mean? So like, so I started talking about that with these folks who ran the Seattle Globalist, and Alex turns to me and he's like, oh, you should write about it. And I was like, bet, I'm writing all the time. I write every day. Like, sure, I'll write about it. So I wrote about it for fun. Yeah. And then I sent it to him and he published it. And I was like, oh, money. I like that. And it became this whole thing where if I had an idea for an article, I would just write it and send it to him, not really even expecting that he would want to publish it. And after about 6 months, he's like, you have to stop sending me articles, like pitch like a normal journalist. And I was like, I don't know, like, okay, what do you want? How does this work? And so they offered me a column. And I just kind of fell into this experience of being a journalist when I don't know, I didn't identify that way. I was a writer. Yeah. And I saw things and I could learn form, right? Like I understood, I could read newspaper articles and be like, okay, this is what they're looking for, and like mimic or create something that felt still like me, but in the form. Mm-hmm. And then I started like winning awards and stuff. I was like, oh, okay, this is kind of a thing. But what came up for me is my resistance and just how much I hated the idea of being a journalist, because I just think of that person as being the one who sticks the microphone in the face of the person who just lost their kid. Mm-hmm. And I just didn't also like the ways in which communities of color have been covered and marginalized. Like, if you let white media tell it, Rainier Beach is a terrible place full of murderers and thieves and criminals and you know, someone coming, you know, moved here from Wisconsin originally, and I lived in the North End because that's where the U was. Mm-hmm. So the second time around, when I came back in 2006 or so, I eventually made the shift and became a South Ender, and nothing I'd ever read about the South End had any validity at all. It was all complete garbage. Mm-hmm. Which made me think, God, like, who wants to be a journalist if all you tell is lies? Yeah. And then I realized, well, that's a choice. That's a choice that lots of people are making, but it is a choice. And what would happen if I made a choice to center the narratives of my community? Mm. What would happen if I wrote a story about people I know, people I see who are doing art, who are caring for children, who are like Bridget Hempstead, putting together information for folks so that Black people don't get breast cancer and die. Like, all of this was happening in this city, and nobody was talking about it. Mm. So long way to get to. That's where this book comes from, is the ways in which I wanted to have a conversation with this city that hadn't been had.
Mm. Mm. Every time, so I've heard you speak and I've read the book, and there's so much about how you talk about the book and even how you talk about your own writing and what you write about, where this sort of expression or this sort of idea of my community comes in. And I love the way you use it. I appreciate the way you use it because it feels so firm. Like, it feels solid. It feels like I know what she's pointing to. I often have a hard time with that for myself because I don't know what I'm pointing to exactly when I say my community. I have helped with, in Latinx organizations in New York, in Alabama, here in town. I have, been I feel like such a good helper in a lot of different communities. But the way, things have evolved with the larger, the larger political designation of Latinx, right? Mm-hmm. That not only are we not a monolith, but we are a very complicated partisan political monolith community. You know, everything from just relatives that see the current state of the United States in a different way than I do, right? And friends, right? And I feel that so much about what it means to be Latinx is what it feels to be a displaced U.S. American, a displaced American, right? Because South America is also America, right? But a displaced American, and everybody has to find their place beyond just these designations of old world flags or old world culture. And I think for how that feels most represented in this collection here, there's a story I have in there which started off as a concern about what it means to sort of like come into your early 20s, dependent on family but trying to be independent of family in New York, and just everything from like working and dating, right? and knowing how it is, or feeling like you know how to express yourself outside your family, you know how to express yourself romantically, but there's always sort of that pullback of like you are responsible for everybody that's younger than you. You are responsible for everybody that's older than you, that you're related to. You are just responsible for all of this. To be a model, to be a sort of like a sage or whatever it is, right? Even as you're figuring things out and realizing you don't know anything in this world. Just because you're the oldest of a generation in a new country and you've got to offer something. And meanwhile, this country is constantly telling you that you have not only that potentially you might not have anything to offer, but that you are, but that your place is so fragile and tenuous at work, at school, right, with friends, right, that what do you have to offer, right? And so many of these stories feel personal, but that one felt like the most personal, right? There's this one scene in it where, you know, as this young man is sort of like struggling, it's like he's at work and his father calls him to say, hey, listen, you got to come to your grandmother's second birthday party that's improvised right now, right?
Yes.
I'm like, oh, you like every family party that's improvised, right? Like, oh, I have to come to something that isn't planned even though I have plans. And so the character gets there, and then, you know, it's his cousin that pulls him aside and sort of has this sort of conversation that says, like, I feel where you're at. I'm there too. And I also don't know how to separate myself from everybody, right?
And still be part of community.
And still be part of community, right? Because that's sort of like where you are constantly told you sort of, that's what you're told that you have to be, right? Like you have to be one with your community, with your family, and then also you have to be independent and you have to figure things out for yourself and you have to sort of separate. And so I grew up with that tension and still don't know how to figure that out, right? And I realized, oh, okay, what if I turn friends into family? That might be a very helpful way, right? And in that sense, it has felt like this. There's so many of us in the city that are displaced. We're transplants, and we're trying to figure out who we are to ourselves, to our families, to our friends, and to this place. And I feel this place has felt like a really great city to find that community in, but also, also share frustrations about this place, right? Like that there isn't enough funding for the arts, and you're trying to be a part of that conversation. That you are trying to understand how to be there for each other, not as allies but as family members, right? Because allies still say, alliances can be broken, right? As treaties can be broken, as U.S. history has taught us
over and over again.
But to be in relationship with somebody is so much more valuable and so much more really the point, right? Than just like whatever it means to be an ally, which I still don't know what that word means half the time. So yeah, I feel you, right? This notion of like the concerns of this place, finding community in this place, finding what it means to be one with them, apart from them, and to know what it is even to call somebody part of your community, right? And yeah.
Just to speak to that a bit, so as someone who, I guess the designation, everybody's always inventing these words, right, is ADOS for what I am, right? It's like African descendant of slave, or what, this is how we're referred to as the Black folks who come from the stolen tribe and don't have, like, there's no, this is it.
Yeah.
In terms of what I have. Like, I have the states, and it's broken, and it's toxic, and a lot of times it's trying to kill me. So for me, there's a bit of urgency around being able to designate community, and being able to see and be in right relationship and in community with people who aren't broken or trying to kill me. Or might be broken, but still, there's like some modicum of safety or some ability for us to build together. So when I think about, for me, like what I've been kind of even been learning through this process of Still True, and building this book as I'm reading it, because I'm reading out loud again for the audiobook, I feel like even I'm understanding it more than what I really understood when it was first published. And when I'm looking at your work, when I'm looking at 3 Alarm Fire, I was doing the thing that I kind of hate when people do to me, but I'm gonna do it to you anyway. No. Is that I was like wondering like about what parts were fictional and what parts were more informed by your upbringing, and just even seeing, like, reading the geography of New York and New Jersey, and like just the ways in which you so beautifully capture these different communities and these moments and these feelings. I was wondering, like, what which other pieces were really coming through you as an expression of things that you've lived through.
So the book's title, which I feel like this is a good part in the podcast, right? So 3 Alarm Fire, the title of the book came from, one, there are 15 individual stories, but they come in these groups of threes that feel like they are thematically together. Some of them very much are sort of like weave together in terms of plot. But for the most part, the 3 Alarm Fire is the first designation in the multiple alarm fire category. And once you get to that category, it can be catastrophic. And so 3 Alarm Fire to me feels, okay, if it's the first designation, it can be both catastrophic, but you can also put the fire out. Like, there's still time to put the fire out. And so, I think that's one of the trickiest questions that I had to prepare to answer, right? Is like, oh, this is fiction, but what feels true, or what is true? And there's a seed of truth in all of them. I think Warrior, New Jersey was...
Warrior, New Jersey, I was going to ask.
That felt like a composite of a couple, 2 or 3 experiences, but it's a love story. It's a college love story, right? In which you're trying to figure out yourself, while at the same time trying to figure out what friendship means and when friendship becomes attraction, right? And these subtle steps that often takes, that you might miss, that come to you in unexpected ways, and that you're just sort of being in an experience with somebody else because you enjoy these moments, and then having both the friendship, the attraction, and the intimacy sort of come because you're just enjoying these moments, but you're coming together because you're both being excluded. And in the case of Warrior, New Jersey, I remember it's so funny to me going to college with kids who were, almost entirely raised in the city. I was not. So West New York, New Jersey felt like, the extension of Jackson Heights, Queens, but it's also across the river, and it's formally out of state. And then Jersey City, which also has always thought of itself as like another borough, even though the only outer borough, if there is to be one, right outside of the boroughs, that feels welcomed is a gentrified Hoboken. I think for obvious reasons. But just thinking, being in college and just sort of like seeing these conversations, being confronted with these conversations of like, oh, you're from Jersey, you're not from this place. And meanwhile, I'm looking at every single one of these sort of kids that feel like they're from this place and sort of identifying them as people who are excluding each other in the same way they're trying to exclude everybody else. So everybody wants to be part of an exclusive club, right? Even if that exclusive club is just a club of one, right? And so that was very much born, seeded from sort of a handful of experiences. Drown is this story of just high school sort of like romance, two seniors on their way out, and having sort of like just like a date and or just having some time together, and
which goes totally sideways.
Which is born out of a true story where like I'm in my last year of school in high school, and I was just so excited to sort of like take out like, you know, like just a cheerleader, and we got along really well. And then I made a right into the Holland Tunnel, which was the wrong direction into the Holland Tunnel. And I didn't realize it until there was a truck's lights coming right at me. And then I broke really hard, backed up into the shoulder, and I had to stay there for a little bit. And then, you know, the police siren comes up behind us. And so I just absolutely froze and I didn't know what to do. And so that story sort of like born from that experience. And it kind of played out that way. I mean, for the most part, but in real life, we recovered and were able to drive around for a bit and spend some more time together. But in the story, because of the experience with the police officer, that actually it actually did, you know, I try to model it and dramatize it in the story, but it did play out almost exactly that way. Just the police officer's objectification of like this, you know, young woman I was with in the passenger seat, her feeling completely violated. Yeah. And me just like realizing just you know, man, this world can be such like so. I mean, you know it intrinsically, right? But that to sort of see it play out, I'm like, this world is absolutely awful to women, young women, you know, regardless of whatever stage of life they're in, just women. And so that story was very much seeded from that experience. But again, in real life, it played out a little bit more. Eventually, played out a little bit more. It played out differently. And so yeah, there's so much about this story that's about intimacy, relationship, love, and it also sort of like what the city does to us, what this density of people does to us, and how it shapes who we are with each other, why we are the way we are with each other. But I also see cities as like, okay, if this is the highest concentration of geography or like, you know, parts of a landscape that can affect us in really tragic ways, it is also by default the highest concentration of hope. Because if just by sheer numbers, right? Just by sheer numbers,
the math of hope.
Yeah. Anything that is sort of a lot of something not good is also a lot of something good. Just by the odds, right? The laws of probability. And so, and I have seen that sort of like play out in sort of like my own sort of going down rabbit holes of sort of philosophy and faith, where you sort of, you know, there's partisan politics plays out this urban versus rural divide really, you know, for the sake of power and hierarchy. But it is so funny to me how this same book and set of texts that people appeal to say that the cities are horrible places also actually depict cities as places of redemption.
Places of starting over, places of reinvention.
Places of reinvention, starting over, places of hope, places where that's where we are to meet each other ultimately into grace and redemption, not the country, not isolation, right? If the cities bring us together and we shape ourselves into something tragic when we're together, this also offers an opportunity because we're so together. Cities offer this really wonderful place to be hopeful and also actually enact that hope into something great.
Well, and we're forced to confront each other one way or another, or to deal with each other in ways where, yeah, when we're in isolation, like there's no challenge, there's no.
No. It reminds me of Mel Gibson. He's so problematic, and one of the things that is most problematic for me is that he calls himself like this person of faith or religion, and he has his own church on his property. How wonderful it is, and how blinding it is to have a church of one. Right? Where you don't have to confront anything at all about anybody else or even yourself.
Well, that's the white way.
Yeah. And I want to segue to one of the essays in your book. There's this one essay that I feel speaks of what we just talked about. I know there's a subtitle to it, but the main title is Super Salad. It's about it's about this sort of this U.S. Mexico sort of dichotomy where you differentiate this idea of a melting pot, so the soup versus the salad, and you articulate this experience abroad in such a way where it rings true to me, right? Because I have invested so much time, not just sort of like in these foundational texts of Latinx history, Latin American history, where you talk about, or where these writers, Jose Marti comes to mind, right, where you're sort of like talking about not the melting pot, the opposite of the melting pot, having to confront each other, sort of like mestizajes, like racial inequalities, and also sort of like racial diasporas in a way, right? Can you talk more about that experience and how you arrived to this notion of soup or salad, right? That distinction as you saw it between the two metaphors.
Yeah. So my quest to become a study abroad program director, I was wandering around Mexico and having all sorts of interesting adventures, like by myself for a chunk of time. And I stumbled upon this town called Yanga, which is, the tagline is, it's the first free town in the Americas. And it's named after Gaspar Yanga or Inganga. They still actually don't know this brother's name, which, that gives you a little sense of where we're at. It's like he was a person who escaped from slavery and then led a 30-year rebellion and basically like disrupted the slave trade and the sugar trade, particularly in Mexico, so much that the government was forced to deal with him because they're like, yo, you're messing with our money. we can't keep people enslaved here because they just, run away to the mountains of Orizaba, and they literally were just like living out in the mountains in Mexico for like 30 years. So I went there looking for Afro-Mexicans. Wasn't nobody there. I shouldn't say that. There was one family left. There was one family left, and they actually had gotten there maybe in the 1800s as railroad workers from Martinique. So that was kind of it was interesting to like sit with them and hear their stories. But there was just all this like allusion to Black culture and to Black liberation, and wasn't no Black people anywhere. And I was like, because you taste it in the food and the ingredients that they use, like, that Black people were there, but culturally in so many different ways they had disappeared. And that's when I was like really thinking about super salad and the ways in which, like, I think back to being in like 7th and 8th grade and learning history and learning about colonization, and they were trying to explain like the different philosophies that colonizers had. And like, of course, as an adult, I'm like, wow, we really spent a lot of time thinking about colonization, but not in a way that was disruptive in any way, like, but just so we understood it and could be complicit in it or understand like why things were playing out the way that they were, but never for the purpose of questioning it or thinking about, are there other ways that we could have lived our lives? So yeah, I was just kind of thinking back to that and realizing like there are ways in which the United States tries to make us into soup, but we're still salad. We still exist. We still have cultural autonomy. We still remember traditions beyond the colonial ways. And every time we do that, there's a bit more of our personhood that perseveres and that doesn't get just monetized and turned into like, you know, the little black dolls they sell in the stores in the town with no black people.
Yeah, I found that metaphor so important because some of us don't have the privilege to dissolve, right?
And some of us don't want to dissolve.
And some of us don't want to, right? Yeah.
Like, I feel like, yeah, like as this person who, again, to reference the Lost Tribe, like I always find it interesting. So I live in Rainier Beach, where every Uber and Lyft driver lives in a 2-block radius of me. So if I ever call Lyft, it's like there immediately because they're already there. And when I get in, it's inevitably an East African person, and they look at me, and then they look at me again, and they look at me again, and they're like, and I'm like, I'm waiting for it. Where are you from? And I'm like, oh, I'm from here. No, but where are you from? And I'm like, generationally, my family is from Des Moines, Iowa. They don't like that answer. They're always like very disappointed. No. But where are you from? And I'm like, so I guess they ain't teaching diaspora in other people's schools. But like, this is it. Like, this is all we get. And everything that we've been taught about who we are is slavery.
Yeah.
That's it. Is colonization, is being conquered, is being lost, is being stolen. So to me, the idea of like literally dissolving into nothingness, where even my hair and my skin will disappear in a few generations, sounds terrible. I'd rather be salad.
Yeah.
So much to chat about, but I believe we're
out of time.
We're there.
You're gonna cut us off at some point, right?
I'm gonna cut us off. To be continued, but it was lovely to have these conversations.
It was so amazing.
People should definitely go and buy our books. So Still True, The Evolution of an Unexpected Journalist by Reagan Jackson, and
3 Alarm Fire, a collection of short stories by Juan Reyes. Oh, can you get that clap like on the audio?
This is all made possible by Hinton Publishing. If you would like to support the work that we do, please consider becoming a monthly supporter. If you go to hintonpublishing.com/support-Hinton, you will see the many different tiers of support that you can sign up for. And no matter what your budget is, you can choose something that you will not miss at the end of the month. We want to thank Ben Hunter for this beautiful intro and outro music that we use. We want to thank Michael B. Main for recording the gorgeous audio of our conversation today. And we want to thank you for joining us. We look forward to seeing you again at our next episode.